let's get right into it. Number 10. Playing dead against a bear. Imagine you're strolling through the woods, humming a jaunty tune, perhaps contemplating the existential dread of a squirrel, when suddenly, a grizzly bear the size of a small car decides you look like a particularly crunchy snack. Your ancestors, bless their cotton socks, had a trick for this: play dead. Just flop onto the ground, curl into a fetal position, and hope Mr. Snuggles decides you're not worth the effort. Now, let's be clear, this isn't some ancient wisdom passed down through generations of bear whisperers. This is the equivalent of trying to convince a hungry lion that you're actually a very convincing rug. The logic, if you can call it that, was rooted in the idea that some predators are less interested in carrion. If you're not moving, you're not a threat, and maybe, just maybe, they'll move on to something that puts up a bit more of a fight. But here's the kicker: this only sometimes works for certain types of bears, specifically grizzlies who might be defending cubs or territory and are just trying to neutralize a perceived threat. Black bears? They'll see your Oscar-worthy performance as an invitation to a free buffet. Your modern-day brain, however, is screaming, "Run, you idiot!" Because, let's be honest, playing dead when a predator is actively trying to eat you is less a survival strategy and more a desperate attempt to avoid eye contact. It's like trying to solve a math problem by closing your eyes and hoping the answer appears. Spoiler, it doesn't. So, next time you're in the wilderness, maybe invest in some bear spray instead of practicing your dramatic collapse. Number 9. Bloodletting for everything. Ever woken up with a headache and thought, you know what this needs? Less blood? No? Good, because you're not living in the 17th century. For centuries, if you had a cough, a fever, a broken leg, or even just a bad case of the Mondays, the go-to medical solution was to drain some of your precious bodily fluids. The theory, championed by ancient Greek physicians like Hippocrates and Galen, was that illness stemmed from an imbalance of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Too much blood? Well, obviously, you need to get rid of some. Never mind that you're already weak from whatever ailment you have, a good old-fashioned leech or a strategically placed incision will fix you right up. It was the ultimate medical panacea, a one-size-fits-all cure that somehow managed to make every patient feel worse before they, hopefully, got better. The sheer audacity of this medical practice is astounding. Your body, a marvel of biological engineering, works tirelessly to maintain a delicate balance, and these ancient doctors were just like, nah, let's just poke a hole in it and see what happens. It's the medical equivalent of trying to fix a leaky faucet by turning off the entire city's water supply. Thankfully, modern medicine has progressed beyond the point where your doctor greets you with a scalpel and a bucket, proving that sometimes, the best survival trick is to just leave your blood where it belongs, inside your veins. Number 8. Trepanation for headaches. Ever had a headache so bad you thought your brain was trying to escape your skull? Well, for thousands of years, some of our ancestors took that thought quite literally. Their solution? Trepanation. That's right, they drill, scrape, or cut a hole directly into the living, breathing bone of the skull. Not exactly a Tylenol moment, is it? The logic behind this rather aggressive form of cranial ventilation was varied. Sometimes it was believed to release evil spirits causing mental illness or seizures. Other times, it was thought to relieve pressure from head injuries, or even, bafflingly, cure persistent headaches. Imagine going to your doctor with a migraine, and they pull out a stone drill. You'd probably just decide to live with the headache, wouldn't you? The sheer audacity of performing such a procedure without anesthesia, sterile tools, or even a basic understanding of neuroanatomy is mind-boggling. Many patients, surprisingly, survived the initial surgery, evidenced by healed bone around the trepanation sites. But let's be real, surviving a hole in your head doesn't necessarily mean it was a good idea. It just means your body is incredibly resilient, or perhaps the evil spirits were just as shocked as you were and decided to vacate the premises. Today, if you have a headache, you take an ibuprofen. If you have a serious head injury, you get a neurosurgeon with a lot of fancy equipment and a sterile operating room. The idea of letting someone chip away at your cranium with a sharp rock to cure a tension headache is less a survival trick and more a testament to humanity's early desperate attempts to understand the squishy thing inside our heads. It's the ultimate DIY project gone horribly, horribly wrong. Number 7. Wearing a plague doctor mask. Picture this: a deadly pandemic sweeps across the land, wiping out entire populations. What's your go-to protective gear? A sophisticated N95 mask? A full hazmat suit? Nah, your medieval ancestors had something far more theatrical. Enter the plague doctor, decked out in a long dark coat, a wide-brimmed hat, and most famously, a grotesque bird-like mask with a long beak. Now, you might think this was some early attempt at personal protective equipment, and you'd be half right. The beak wasn't just for show, it was typically stuffed with aromatic herbs, spices, and dried flowers. The belief was that the plague was spread by miasma, bad air. So, logically, if you could filter that bad air through a bouquet of potpourri, you'd be safe, right? It's the medical equivalent of thinking you can stop a bullet with a scented candle. While the long coat and gloves might have offered some minimal protection by creating a physical barrier, the mask itself was more about psychological warfare against the disease, and probably the patients, who must have been terrified. The herbs might have made the stench of death slightly more tolerable for the doctor, but they did absolutely nothing to stop the actual bacterial infection. It's a classic case of treating the symptom, bad smell, rather than the cause, tiny, invisible killers. So, next time you're feeling a bit under the weather, maybe skip the elaborate bird costume and just wash your hands. Your immune system will thank you, and you won't look like you're auditioning for a very morbid avant-garde play. Number 6. Believing in spontaneous generation. Ever left a dirty dish in the sink for a few days and noticed some activity? Your ancient ancestors would have looked at that and confidently declared, "Aha! Life just poofed into existence from that leftover pasta." This, my friends, is the glorious, scientifically baffling concept of spontaneous generation. For millennia, people genuinely believed that living organisms could arise from non-living matter. Maggots from rotting meat? Obviously, the meat just decided to become maggots. Mice from old rags and grain? Clearly, the rags and grain just got together and had a mouse party. It wasn't just a fringe theory, it was widely accepted, even by intellectual giants like Aristotle. The idea was that there was some sort of vital force in certain non-living materials that, under the right conditions, could spark life. It's like believing your socks will spontaneously evolve into sentient beings if you leave them in the laundry basket long enough. The implications for survival were interesting. Why bother with hygiene or pest control when life just happens? If your house is infested with vermin, it's not because you left food out, it's because your house is just a particularly fertile breeding ground for spontaneous rodent creation. It took centuries, and the meticulous experiments of folks like Francesco Redi and Louis Pasteur, to finally put this delightfully absurd notion to bed. They showed, with actual evidence, that life comes from pre-existing life. So, next time you see mold on your bread, remember it didn't just appear out of thin air, it had parents. And maybe clean your kitchen. Your modern brain knows better than to let your dinner turn into a science experiment. Number 5. Carrying a lucky charm, instead of a weapon. Ever faced a truly terrifying situation, like a charging wild boar or a particularly aggressive tax auditor, and thought, if only I had my lucky rabbit's foot? Your ancient ancestors certainly did. For millennia, humanity has clung to the belief that certain objects possess mystical powers, capable of warding off evil, attracting good fortune, or even deflecting a spear. We're talking about everything from polished stones and animal teeth to intricate amulets and dried herbs. The logic was simple, if entirely unfounded. If you believe it works, it must work, right? It's the ultimate placebo effect, but with potentially fatal consequences. Imagine heading into battle armed with nothing but a shiny pebble, while your opponent is wielding a sharpened bronze sword. Your lucky charm might boost your morale, but it's not going to stop a blade. The human brain, ever the optimist, loves to find patterns and assign meaning, even when none exists. This cognitive bias, known as illusory correlation, made it easy to link a positive outcome with a charm, even if the charm had absolutely nothing to do with it. You survived the hunt? Must have been the bear claw necklace. You didn't get sick? Thank the dried mandrake root. It's like crediting your car's smooth ride to the fuzzy dice hanging from the rearview mirror, completely ignoring the engineering marvels under the hood. While a lucky charm might offer a psychological comfort blanket in a world full of unknowns, it's a terrible substitute for actual preparation or, a functional weapon. Today, we understand that survival often hinges on tangible skills, knowledge, and appropriate tools, not on whether you remembered to rub your lucky horseshoe. So, next time you're facing a genuine threat, maybe leave the four-leaf clover at home and bring a plan, or at least a very loud whistle. Your life isn't a game of chance, it's a game of physics, and physics doesn't care about your lucky underwear. Number 4. Eating dirt, for minerals. Ever felt a sudden, inexplicable craving for a handful of good old-fashioned topsoil? No? Well, congratulations, you're probably not suffering from pica, a condition that sometimes manifests as a desire to eat non-nutritive substances. But for many of our ancestors, and even some cultures today, the practice of geophagy, or eating dirt, was a surprisingly common, albeit baffling, survival strategy. The idea wasn't just to fill an empty stomach when food was scarce, though that certainly played a role. It was often believed that certain clays and soils contained essential minerals, or could even detoxify the body by binding to toxins. Imagine your great-great-great-grandma, feeling a bit peckish, deciding to munch on a mud pie because she heard it was good for her iron levels. While it's true that some soils do contain minerals, they also contain parasites, bacteria, heavy metals, and a whole host of other things that your digestive system would rather not encounter. It's like trying to get your daily vitamins by licking a rusty playground slide. Technically, there might be some iron, but at what cost? The human body is a complex machine, and while it needs minerals, it prefers them in a bioavailable form, ideally from, actual food. The science behind geophagy often points to a desperate attempt to supplement diets lacking in specific nutrients, or to soothe an upset stomach by coating it with clay. But the risks far outweighed any potential benefits, leading to blockages, infections, and nutrient deficiencies from the very substances meant to help. Today, if you're feeling low on iron, you eat spinach or take a supplement. You don't go digging in the backyard. The notion that a handful of earth could be a viable dietary supplement is a stark reminder of how little our ancestors understood about nutrition and how much they were willing to risk for a perceived benefit. It's the original eat your greens advice, just with more grit. Number 3. Lobotomies for mental illness. Ever felt a little overwhelmed by life, maybe a bit anxious, or just generally not feeling like yourself? Your modern brain probably thinks, therapy, medication, a long walk, maybe some ice cream. Your ancestors, particularly those in the not-so-distant past of the early to mid-20th century, had a far more direct approach for mental distress, the lobotomy. This involved severing the connections in the brain's prefrontal cortex, often with a literal ice pick inserted through the eye socket. The logic, if you can call it that, was that by disrupting these neural pathways, you could alleviate severe mental illness, calm agitated patients, and generally make people more manageable. It was the ultimate fix-it-with-a-hammer approach to the most complex organ in the known universe. Imagine going to the doctor for your crippling anxiety, and they suggest, how about we just disconnect a part of your brain? The sheer horror of this procedure, often performed without consent or proper understanding of its long-term effects, is a chilling reminder of how desperate humanity was to understand and control the mind. While some patients did become calmer, many were left with severe cognitive impairments, personality changes, and a permanent reduction in their emotional range. It was less a cure and more a radical alteration of the self, turning vibrant individuals into docile shadows. Today, we have a nuanced understanding of mental health, with a range of pharmacological and therapeutic interventions that don't involve scrambling your brain like a bad omelet. The lobotomy stands as a stark, terrifying monument to a time when the brain was a black box, and the solution to its mysteries was often brutal simplicity. It's the medical equivalent of trying to fix a software bug by deleting half the code. Spoiler, it doesn't usually end well. Number 2. Believing in miasma theory and avoiding baths. Remember that plague doctor mask we talked about? Well, its existence was largely thanks to the pervasive and utterly incorrect miasma theory. For centuries, people believed that diseases like cholera, the plague, and malaria weren't caused by tiny, invisible microbes, but by bad air, noxious fumes, foul odors, and decaying organic matter. If it smelled bad, it was bad, and it would make you sick. The logical, to them, conclusion? Avoid anything that smells bad, and for goodness sake, don't let fresh air into your house if it carries those deadly stenches. This also led to some truly baffling hygiene practices. Why bother bathing when water opens your pores and lets the bad air in? Why clean your streets when the stench is just a natural part of life, and disturbing it might release more miasma? It's the ultimate ignorance is bliss approach to public health, except the bliss was often followed by a swift and unpleasant demise. Imagine living in a world where the smell of a sewer was considered a direct threat to your life, but the actual sewage itself, teeming with bacteria, was largely ignored. Your ancestors were essentially playing a game of olfactory roulette, convinced that if they could just avoid the smelly bits, they'd be fine. The irony, of course, is that many of the practices meant to ward off miasma, like sealing up houses and avoiding washing, actually increased the spread of disease by creating perfect breeding grounds for germs. It took the pioneering work of scientists like John Snow, who traced cholera outbreaks to contaminated water, and Louis Pasteur, who finally proved the existence of germs, to dismantle this fragrant fallacy. Today, we understand that cleanliness is, in fact, next to godliness, and that a good shower won't invite disease, but rather wash it away. The miasma theory is a hilarious, if tragic, reminder that sometimes, what you think you know can be far more dangerous than what you don't. It's like trying to avoid a car crash by closing your eyes and hoping for the best. Spoiler, it rarely works. Number 1. The humoral theory diet. Ever been told to eat chicken soup when you have a cold? Or that spicy food will heat you up? You can thank your ancient ancestors, and their utterly bizarre understanding of the human body, for these enduring culinary myths. For nearly 2 millennia, Western medicine was dominated by the humoral theory, the belief that your body was a delicate balance of 4 primary fluids, or humors: blood, sanguine, yellow bile, choleric, black bile, melancholic, and phlegm, phlegmatic. Each humor was associated with specific qualities: hot, cold, wet, or dry, and an imbalance was thought to cause illness. So, if you had a fever which was considered hot and wet, the solution wasn't to take an aspirin, but to consume cold and dry foods to restore balance. Imagine your doctor prescribing a diet based on your perceived emotional state and the temperature of your spleen. It's the original personalized medicine, if personalized medicine was based on pseudoscience and a profound misunderstanding of biology. The sheer complexity of trying to balance these invisible fluids with specific foods, herbs, and even environmental factors led to dietary restrictions and medical advice that would make a modern nutritionist weep. Feeling a bit melancholic, cold and dry, associated with black bile? Better eat something hot and wet, like a hearty stew, and avoid anything cold like cucumbers. The irony is that while some of these dietary recommendations might have had incidental benefits, like chicken soup being hydrating and comforting, the underlying reasoning was pure fantasy. Your ancestors were essentially playing a complex game of culinary Jenga, hoping that by adding or subtracting certain qualities from their diet, they could prevent their internal fluid tower from toppling over. Today, we understand that nutrition is about macronutrients, micronutrients, and calories, not about whether your salad is too cold for your sanguine disposition. The humoral theory diet is a hilarious, if somewhat tragic, reminder that sometimes, the most elaborate explanations for how our bodies work are also the most spectacularly wrong. It's like trying to fix a computer virus by changing the color of your monitor. Spoiler, it doesn't work, and you'll probably still have that cold. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.